second segment of Prince of Persia Sands of Time. If you're new to the series, we are doing this without taking damage, without upgrading, and a couple of other things that aren't that interesting. But we're coming up against the first puzzle of the game, and it looks really high concept and kind of awkward with all the cutscenes, but it's actually pretty elegantly designed, I would say. And the idea is you pick up the corresponding glyphs and you rotate them accordingly. And it has to be done in a set way because it's been built in a set way. And it does look really complicated, but it's actually surprisingly simple. I'm going to make it look harder than it needs to be, because I got mixed up later on by the guy that's screaming at us right now. It's like he's auditioning for God of War Ragnarok, just heckling the living shit out of you when you're trying to do the puzzle. But the idea is very simple, and the way it works is very natural. It leads me to complementing a puzzle system in a game that's from 20 years ago and could fit in right now and give you just the right amount of challenge and just the right amount of cerebral engagement, which I really appreciate. And if you've watched my other videos, you'll know that I'm not a big puzzle guy. I'm not a big fan of it at all. But this really hits me in some resonant areas, which I approve of. Because I think puzzles can be good in games. I just think a lot of the times they tend to waste your time. Whereas coming back to this one, it did make me think a little bit, and it did give me something that was quite unique. And considering this came out when it did, the idea of this entire building being rotated and using all these different factors, and there's the illusion of so much more going on here. It could have easily been a lot more complicated, but I think that's the sign of good design, when you make something that conceptually looks really advanced, but the solution is rather simple and quite elegant in its delivery. So I'm all over this, and it's going to take a little while as we do it here. And I'm so used to trimming these things out of walkthroughs. Usually I would just get rid of this completely because it's not the fighting or it's not what I'm focusing on at the moment, but this is a rare moment where I'm able to share this with you guys and talk over it. And I want to talk over this idea of going back to some of these classic games and playing off a bit of nostalgia. This one works because we're getting a remake for this at some point, and it'll be really nice as a contrast to see what they do with that. But additionally, it leaves me with the opportunity to play the future games like Warrior Within, which is my favourite Prince of Persia game, and of course the Two Thrones that came out afterwards, which is a little bit closer to this one than the previous, than the one that, preceded it, and things like that. So there's lots that can be done with this series if you're excited. And the best way to support it, guys, is just to show me that you like it, show me that you want more. And the first episode went down really well. There was a lot of people that were quite nostalgic, so that's good to see, because I'm nostalgic as well. And any of the videos that I put up right now, guys, if you like them and you support them, it will generally mean that they get priority. That's kind of how I'm doing it. There's a lot of stuff I want to record right now. There's a lot of stuff I have recorded right now. But if I put something up and it's something that you really dig... just then, guys, I ended up going back down because that guy mixed me up, but I just trimmed it out, went back to where I was, and then came back up, so... It's just a crossfade to get around that sequence. You might have noticed also that I put a video up for Genji Dawn of the Samurai, which is a game I really, really like. And I'd love to cover it on YouTube. But the video itself, I don't know if it's just there's not that many people interested in it, or perhaps it was a bit boring, or something of that nature. But it didn't do as well as some of the other ones as far as hitting that nostalgia scale. And we just did the Dead Space, and everyone's excited about Dead Space because of the remake, so people were really happy to see that one. Then we did God of War. Because the new God of Wars are so different, people were quite excited to see the older ones, and that one kind of resonated a decent amount. And then, of course, the Crisis Core didn't do so well. People don't really care about that one, which is unfortunate for me and the guide, but, you can't anticipate everyone's going to watch everything. And then moving forward, there are some other things, because I did a poll of some things to see what people were interested in, and this, of course, won that poll. So this one got priority, and it seems like people are excited for it, so I hope you are watching it right now and getting what you wanted as we navigate some of the traps and move forward here. This game is awesome. I am a really big fan of it, and it works surprisingly well, all considered. I will never stop complimenting this game. I just am so smitten with it, and it does have some rough edges, it does have some signs of its design, and there's some really good points being made on that first video where there's some flaws, and you can't really deny them, but there's just something about it that really does hit me in the place where I appreciate design. And I think this game in many ways is some of my favourite level design. This series in general might have some of my favourite environmental, navigation design in any video game, because it's that special to me. But we have a fight here. I'm going to be showcasing the leaping into execution on the ground. You don't have to do this, guys. I like to knock everybody down before I stab them because I found myself getting hit a lot when I didn't do it. You can do a jump over people and then press triangle and execute them up close. But when I do that, I found that I got really annoyed at the animation. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just my brain being weird. But the one on the ground is the one I always used to do back in the day, even though it's not as effective as the one that you do when you jump over. But that other one, some reason, just kind of really frustrates me when I do it too much. One of those mental barricades. But you can do it to both of these enemies. And if you don't know how to do it, guys, you jump over them, you press square, and then you press triangle. And the input is quite particular, but if you do it correctly, the prince will slash them once, and when he lands, he'll execute them with the dagger. You'll see it coming up, it's very good. It is by far one of the more optimal ways to play the game. It just makes that sound effect sound so loud as well when you drink the sand back from them and you get the retrieve. Definitely not my favourite thing. So if you're watching this, guys, and wondering why I'm not doing it, it's just a weird part of my brain that doesn't like it. But get used to doing this. The fighting in this game is probably the weakest part of it, and it happens a lot. And if you're struggling with the fights, I just say grit your teeth and try to learn it a little bit better, because if you don't, some of the fights later on, you'll never do them. They are very lengthy, they are very demanding. And now we get to mess with some of the pressure plates on the wall. And the wall run in this game is surprisingly precise. If you do not move on a direction towards the wall, like on an angle, you will not do a proper wall run. You will do a vertical wall run. And as long as you understand that when you run straight on, you'll run vertically, but if you run on an angle, you'll do the horizontal one, you can kind of control exactly what the prince does, and it's surprisingly precise. Same with this here. You know when you run up a wall, see that just then? You have a moment where the prince will enable you to jump and cancel and then do the swing. If you don't do it, he flips off the wall. And all of this is down to you as a player to do. You know, you don't just hold it and the game does it. You have to press that button. And if you sleep on the timing, you just won't do it. And it lends to this really interesting moment of connection. And speaking of an interesting moment of connection, when you go up to an edge sometimes in this game and you try to jump, sometimes the prince will roll. And sometimes he'll just kind of like try and drop down on the edge of the wall and do all kinds of shenanigans, which leads to a very classic Prince of Persia kill yourself moment. And all of these factors contribute to the platforming feeling very particular, but also completely in your hands. And at first, when you come back to it, you might get a bunch of stuff you don't want, and you might get quite angry and think this feels old and awkward and garbage. Resist the urge to feel that. Because the more you start touching it and the more you start remembering how you're supposed to engage with it, you realise that these systems work very well, and there's a lot of skill in the execution. It's like surprisingly controllable, and controllable in a way that is very reliable. And that's why speedrunners are able to do great things with it, because they've put the time in to get the controls down so that they always get what they want. And it leads to being able to do things that the game doesn't think you should be able to do, and leading to sequence breaks and all kinds of shortcuts and things. And because this game is so much about its navigation, about the traps, about the puzzles, about developing the story between the two main characters, it all just comes together in something that it feels really fresh in spite of it being 20 years old. And it's not without flaw, obviously. There are clear flaws. There are many of them, especially when you start fighting. As much as I like fighting in games, guys, the fighting in this game makes me really frustrated. This was interesting too. I didn't realise you could do this until I accidentally slipped down here. And then I managed to get through it. One of the biggest areas that I'm going to try my best not to complain about is the checkpoints. The checkpoints are extremely poor a lot of the times. And we're in the first difficult fight of the game here. We also have the blue spear man, or twin blade man, or whatever he is. So the rules of this game are quite simple, guys. Some enemies will block certain moves, and then they will be vulnerable to other ones. So there is a gimmick towards killing almost everything in the game. Standard guys, you can jump over them, it's not a problem. Standard guys, you can jump over them and execute them, it's not a problem. This blue guy, if you try to jump over him, he has a programmed counter that knocks you away. And it's always going to win. However, there are ways to jump over him if you want to, but we won't be dabbling in those because there's no real need to. We're going to keep it simple, we're going to keep it basic. And if you're wondering what that is, you can use slow motion to then get a free jump in over him, because you can stun him into a jump and manipulate him like that. But I don't like using the slow motion because I just don't think it really adds anything to the gameplay. Although it is very strong if you're struggling. But one of the things you notice as well is certain monsters can't be executed when you jump over them. Certain monsters will have a tendency to blocking the wall attacks more than others, and you have to use a combination of different tools. And this is your father, this boss character here that's moving around. Do not engage him. He's a lot more capable than the other monsters. And because this game is obsessed with making the prince face the enemies, he does this weird like Witcher 3 slow, awkward movement when you're trying to navigate away from them. And what I like to do in a lot of the fights here, guys, is I like to get space and separation from all the gathering of enemies, and it'll force a monster to teleport in front of you. When they teleport in front of you, you can use that to divide and conquer them. And it's a very effective strategy of getting rid of groups without being close to the other enemies that might attack you. The biggest problem here is how the controls feel and how close the camera tends to get. And all we're going to do is we're going to divide the monsters, we're going to kill them, and then when we build up enough sand on the white area of the attacks, we're going to use the dagger to freeze the blue guys and kill them for free. And if you freeze the blue guys, jump over them and slash them, you tend to have a much better chance of not getting hit when you recover. Because the one area of this game where you'll struggle when you come back, guys, is sometimes the enemies will let you execute people with the dagger, other times they'll start attacking you and you'll just get hit. And because this is an early game, a lot of these telegraphs come out really quickly. And I'm trying my best in a lot of these fights not to block. It's not something conscious that I was doing, it's just I noticed that I didn't really like the input because it's a different input to God of War, and I found it really awkward. So in this fight, I'm going to be blocking because it's early on and I'm still trying to engage with the systems, but later on, I just completely stopped doing it. And what happens is, once you've got rid of all the enemies by, sorting them, killing them, banking the sand on the blue guys to kill them, when you get to your father, you can repeatedly jump over him and he can't move. So you can fight him in some other means if you want to, but the safest strategy is to just execute like that. And the reason you want to do it, guys, is if you mess up, you have to fight like 20 more of those sand creatures before you can even get to that sequence. So there's no reason in messing with fancy parries and doing crazy stuff unless you really love the game. If I loved the combat in this as much as I love it in the sequel, I would have probably tried to make that boss fight a lot more interesting to watch. But truth be told, I don't like fighting in this game. And these creatures here are the dancers, and this is an enemy that you can't do the jump over into execute. You actually have to knock them down. Whereas that move just then, that's it, guys. See that? That's what you do. This guy, you can jump over him and execute him. Where you'll bump into hurdles in Sands of Time is there's detection problems on the jump. So sometimes when you try and jump on somebody, you'll jump on the wrong person. And if that person defends being jumped on, they'll knock you off and hurt you, and it can happen with some pretty generous detection and lead to you failing. And then my favourite one is if you jump over somebody too close to a wall, like that, it doesn't work. It completely fucks up and the prince just stops attacking, and sometimes you'll recover and they'll hit you. So you'll get punished for doing a move that didn't work because they didn't program it to work correctly near walls. And you could argue that it's realistic that you can't jump over somebody near a wall, but it just comes off as a little stupid because at the end of the day, it's a video game. When you do a certain action, you want a certain response, don't you? And that's one of the areas where the combat gets really frustrating later on when you're killing like 50 sand monsters, because if the prince starts fucking up and doing the wrong things, you feel like the game is not listening to you and it gets really, really annoying.
Long enough.
Fortunately, we should be able to circumvent that with some strategies involving wall attacks, running on top of people's heads, and using the sand to stun them. But the secret, hidden danger of Prince of Persia Sands of Time reared its head here, and I had to re-record this, guys. This is actually gameplay recorded after I'd beat the whole game. And that is fall damage. So, whenever you're falling in this game, if you mash circle, you'll roll. And when you roll, you stop yourself taking fall damage. If you don't do that, you take a nice chunk of fall damage, and it's actually kind of subtle when you're playing with low volume, which I often do. So I didn't realise when I drop off this roof coming up, I took damage, and I did the whole next sequence with HP off my bar, and I had to re-record it. But be very careful dropping down here. This is why I'm being really, really, really careful on these falls. Because the falls that hurt you are insane. They don't look high, they don't look like they should hurt you, and then all of a sudden they just hurt you. And then you do them again, and they don't hurt you. So there's this really interesting, like, velocity times mass times, like, RNG times it exists to piss me off in my recording. And it's by far the hardest part about doing Sands of Time no damage. The first one is the checkpoints. The checkpoints are very spaced, very unfair at times, very cruel. And then the second one is that fall damage is the thing that'll get you more than anything, because you'll do a whole segment everything's going great, and then you'll wall run, drop from a slightly higher height, not realize it, and then hit the floor and boom. And because I came back to this game and I didn't do a practice run, this is you watching me play this for the first time in like 10 years, I forgot about fall damage. And it definitely impeded on my journey to get to the Vizier and to end this event that's taking over the kingdom. And even then, even in spite of it, I still had a really good time. But I also put an Elden Ring video up yesterday, guys, because I didn't have anything else to upload. I didn't have any commentary, so I thought I'd put some Elden Ring. And I'm definitely going to be going in and doing some of the other bosses now that the game does not stutter to the same extent it used to on PC for me. And if you like those videos, guys, there will be more of them. And if you don't like them, just don't watch them. If they don't perform, I will not make them. I'll just save them for another time. Because I have lots of plans with Elden Ring, but I do know that there's a lot of fatigue concerning that game, and I understand it. I can absolutely understand people not being interested in it. But thank you for watching, guys. I hope you're enjoying this classic throwback, and I hope you enjoy the plethora of throwbacks that are coming to the channel, and hopefully there'll be something that you really, really enjoy. So thank you for watching, and you take care now.